You are the chief everything officer. You're going to do everything. So before you start hiring, like your founding team needs to have complementary skill sets. We're in the lowest engagement zone. 7 out of 10 people are actively disengaged. This is terrifying, right? Because turnover is low and then engagement's low. So then that means productivity sucks.
I suffered huge burnout at the end of 2023. I don't know if I can do this anymore. I'm just so exhausted, and it's because you're always thinking about okay, what can I do next? What can I do next? What can I improve on? What's the thing? And I imagine if I was feeling that way, how's my team feeling?
What is the one thing that probably people don't focus enough on as leaders or as HR leaders in organizations? And I think it's connection.
So welcome to What the FTE, the podcast where we cut through the noise and talk about what's really happening in HR hiring and the future of work. Today, I am very blessed to be joined by someone who is so kind and so patient and who has seen it all when it comes to Riverside fails, as well as scaling and transforming businesses. Susy Barton is the founder and CEO of Advise to Rise, an executive coach and a global people operations leader. She's led billion-dollar budgets, built high-performing teams at tech unicorns and Fortune 500s, and knows what it takes to align people, strategy, and performance at every level. Susy, welcome to the show.
Nice to meet you, Andy. Thanks for having me.
It's nice to meet you too. I have heard wonderful things, and I'm glad we're getting a chance to connect.
Yeah, no, this is amazing. I feel like we're off to a strong start. We've been having a lot of fun here in the pre-show.
In the pre-show troubleshooting? Well, it's now you've assessed my lack of technical skills as a tech co-founder and CEO. So it's I really hope to set the bar higher throughout this podcast.
We're doing it. It's like a good tech CEO. He's like, no matter what, we're still on. We want to figure this out. And I'm like, let's do it. Let's figure it out. It's all good. So yes.
We figured it out. And speaking of figuring things out, I mean, you've worked across so many industries, companies, and cultures. What's keeping you busy lately?
It's been busy actually. Like this first quarter, a lot of the work I've been doing is working with a couple different innovation centers, and I'm working with two different cohorts that is like projects right now for me. One is 12 CEOs that are coming from different countries that are trying to launch their businesses in Canada. So I've been working with them, and they're coming from all over the place, from like the Middle East, Asia, Latin America, everywhere, and they're companies that are basically at the founder stage, a lot of them MVP, a few of them further along, but they're trying to figure out the Canadian market and like their workforce planning, all of those bits. So it's been interesting because I usually don't work at the, employee number one stage. So that's been fascinating. So I've been doing that fully engulfed kind of for the last couple months. And then I'm also working with another project that I'm working here with the Accelerator Center here in Kitchener-Waterloo, you may be familiar with. So those are more like the companies that are bigger. They're like, 1 million to 5 million recurring revenue, and basically working with them to power them up. So those ones are fun because I'm working on the strategy side too. So really working with them from HR, but more like, how do you hit the market and like, what can you do? I've even been doing like marketing, like stuff for them. I'm like, I'm not a marketer, but now I am. So it's kind of fun. I like doing everything. So I love it's just like, in my work now, since I've transitioned from being in-house in a variety of different roles, and most recently, like couple chief peoples. But before that, I worked on the business side quite a bit, right? So for me, I'm kind of a jack of all trades. So now I just partner with these CEOs and just power them up. Just like, let's talk about strategies and doing different things and getting it done and being competitive. Let's go. So yeah.
But it's funny. People are always like, oh, I'm not a marketer. I'm not I'm not a this, that, or the other. The thing that most people don't realize, and maybe that's because maybe that's a good trait about this, is like, as a people person, an HR professional, a people and culture person, like you've got to be a marketer because you've got to attract talent. And in some places you have a really hard job. It's like, imagine being the person that has to convince someone to come market, Royale toilet paper. Like, that is a really good, big, exciting brand to market to like a real diehard nerd marketer. But like, you've got to convince someone to come, the top people in the world, to come market toilet paper. And then you got to negotiate with vendors and talent and, I think marketers, I mean, to be jack of all trades, I mean, you master of many trades, I'd say.
But yeah, like, yeah, I like to just do it, like let's try, let's move forward and like see what works and pivot quickly. So it's an exciting time for that. Like, I know there's so much uncertainty right now. Like, that's the big thing you hear everybody talking about. I felt like January was such a strong start. We actually saw in December, which I've never seen, a lot of C-suite people getting jobs and landing in December, which is really weird. Like, normally you don't see that because people are waiting out bonus periods, et cetera, like in the first quarter. So, and then January was like going like this, and then all of this tariff discussion just really tailspin, I think, everyone. So, but all of my stuff it keeps on going. I think people are still working away, like, and it might be good. I feel like it's good to have a burning platform. Like, let's push to be more competitive and like rethink how we work in Canada and like what we can offer to the market and do it faster, right? So
I completely agree. This tariff stuff has been really interesting for our business because it's initiated a lot of Buy Canadian initiatives.
oh yes,
And
so,
pretty much all of our competitors are American. So we've got these big companies that we've been talking to for years that are now like, oh, we're doing this Buy Canadian initiative. It's like, you're not doing this because you would have saved $1 million a year for the last 3 years by switching over to us. You're doing this because now it's cool to buy Canadian. Like, what? I mean, woohoo, great, thank you. But like, also, where's the business practicality in this? I mean, kind of going back a minute to, you're talking about these companies coming into Canada. How do you explain the Canadian culture versus other cultures to set them up for, oh, this is just like America light? I imagine that's how they feel.
yeah, I think in general, like, I just explained to them like where the market's at, right? And like what it takes to actually recruit someone here. Cause, we have like, it depends where someone's coming from, right? Like, if you're coming from like a Latin America or even like Asia, like there's always been high turnover and like really competitiveness, hungry to like keep on going, and moving quickly. I think when you come to Canada, like there's different pockets, like, right? Like, I explained that like it's really weird because we don't have like massive unemployment. However, there's been a lot of turnover and there's a lot of shortages in specific skills. There's a lot of skills mismatch in Canada. So, and as they're coming here, I just say, like, listen, and like, this is just general advice. Like, they come over and they're making their first plan to kind of keep on scaling their business. And I'm like, you need to focus on product market fit. Like, forget about like all of the like other stuff. Like, as you're thinking about coming here and like hiring all these people and doing it, like, it is different than wherever you're coming from. And like, you need to figure out, like, do people want this? Like, why do they want it? How would they access it? All of those different things. So I think like, you need to think of it as you are the chief everything officer. You're going to do everything. So before you start hiring, like, your founding team needs to have complementary skill sets, right? And then really think about, how can you leverage those as you go into a new market? And like, don't think that what you do in your current market will necessarily be the same here in our market, right? So I actually get into the product market fit discussion a lot because, you'll see plans where people are like, I need like, I don't know, like 5 engineers. I'm like, what? As like, don't you have one on your founding team? Or maybe you should figure that out and then just keep it really small. Just keep your team super small and then figure out if the concept works first. Like, that has to be where we start. So yeah, it's interesting because like, yeah, they come in with thinking about like what they've heard from friends or like, or like how things might work in certain countries. And it could not work here, right? Like, so I think this is the same thing everywhere. You can't come up with an idea and figure out like, do 50 different things because nothing's working for people to buy it. It might not be the right product, right? So you need to start with like beat it up. Like, is someone asking for it?
That's totally it. I mean, I find we've done it in trying to go into other countries and, thinking, oh, we'll just hire a bunch of people and it's going to be the same as home. And then you quickly find out that, okay, maybe this market isn't ready for this yet, or maybe the things that this market wants to hear are different. And there's always big penalties for that.
Yes, that's for sure. But it's complex, right? Going into a new market, like, there's a lot of like just ways people work, cultural norms, like things that you really underestimate, right? And I'm talking like my previous life, I worked in a lot of global roles where we'd be in, 14 countries, with it. I'd oversee teams all across all of those, right? And you'd really have to have, a lot of things that you do specifically for the different geographies to really think about like, how do I work with them? To make sure that everybody's, tracking to the same goals, and that everybody feels seen, right? Because, I don't know, in my world, when I worked at Manulife, a lot of times, like Manulife, I don't know how much you know about Manulife. Do you know anything about it?
Yeah, quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So, financial services company, right? And like we had, we have footprint here, Canada, US, and then 14 countries in Asia. It's kind of Manulife's like spread out across the world. So, people in North America on my team, like if you had a team meeting, you might have like two people like me talk all the time, like giving out deals, like whatever, your typical, like a type personality. And then, in Asia, they would say nothing in a meeting. Just nothing. You could be there 8 hours. Sometimes, like I'm just using like a really general thing that could happen, right? And some of my smartest, best people ever were in Asia. But you had to like, spend time one-on-one with them and ask them, and like you have to ask them on calls. Like you could have a full call like this. We could talk the whole time and they will say nothing. And then they'll come up with their questions at the end. And then they'll just hammer you with like a bunch of questions because they want to reflect on it. Right. Or like they have questions like only if you ask them. You'll be like, does anybody have questions? Like, and you'd be like, Andy, do you have questions? And you'll ask me like the smartest question about the thing that none of us actually. Yeah. So that's a really big learning, right? About working globally is that, because that takes time and it's about knowing people, right? It's like being connected and understanding and caring about other people and believing that everybody's a strong contributor, right? So
I completely agree. I mean, when we first acquired a business in the UK, we acquired a business that was the exact same size as us. And I remember coming off team all hands calls and I'd have someone be like, oh, you knocked that one out of the park. Like, that was incredible. And then I got the team in the UK that was like, that was the worst meeting we've ever been to. What's this guy talking about? Also the term knocking it out of the park, baseball, it's cricket here, you got to get your terms right. And I grew up in the UK, like I spent my formative years here. So you'd think that I would have figured out the subtle nuances to the English language that help drive the culture in the UK and how it's driven differently than in North America. But you got to have an experienced people leader on the ground, or else you end up saying things like knocking it out of the park and having people be like, I don't know what that means.
Oh yeah. And like Canada is very nuanced. Like my husband's from Spain, and I remember when he came here and someone would be talking to two of us about something and he'd be like, oh, that sounds like it's going great. I was like, no, it's not. I was like, that wasn't going great for that other person. I was like, it's all nuanced, right? Like he's been here for a long time, so he now knows, right? But like, I find even between Canada and US, like the US is much more direct, and Europe's way more direct, or Asia, like way more direct in their communication. But Canadians are generally nice, like, and they're kind of like sitting on top of something, kind of directionally telling you how they feel about things, right? So it's actually hard to follow. So if you have that like type of collaborative, Canadian culture, which there's so many great things, but when you go globally leading with that, it can be confusing, right? If you're not directive enough. So
I would say very confusing. One of the things that I've found is that I'm that collaborative, and it actually happened to me with one of my teams in Central Europe. We're having a conversation like, what about this? What about this? What about this? Like, wouldn't it be cool if we did stuff like this? And one of the guys on the team said point blank, well, what are your expectations? Just tell me what the expectations are and I'll do that. They're like, because I'm confused. You're talking about all these ideas. I'm like, no, that's your job. We're just brainstorming here. Like, you don't have to actually take anything out of this other than like, I want this to be really cool and really fun. And it's like, yeah, it'd be more fun if we weren't brainstorming. You just told me what to do. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. And it's all about cultural norms, right? Like maybe where that person grew up, it's like very much like they're told instructions and then they execute on them, right? So yeah, no, there's a lot to be said for just understanding the norms and what's respected and just how people work to get stuff done. 150% for sure. That's half the battle. You need to like figure out how to just work together and know each other, collaborate, all that stuff.
Well, it really impacts engagement. And I mean, I think in general with the people that I'm talking to, especially like in international and remote, a lot of people are looking for advice on engagement. So, I mean, I see turnarounds stabilizing because people are afraid to leave. But in today's market, who's really lucky to be here? Do you think the employer or the employee, like, where do you think that market is today?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that it's an interesting question. Like, I was talking a bit about this with Holly, like before this, about it's a good pull for LinkedIn, right? Like,
Yeah.
is it like lucky to work somewhere, or are they lucky to have the employee? And I guess it depends on the company and the person. But assuming that all of that is like equal, then I would say I always think that you're lucky to work at the company myself. Like, I think there's a loss of this appreciation of, like yourself, like you started this, amazing organization. You're doing well. You've scaled globally, right? And, someone gets to join the mission with you, right? And they get to contribute to that and be part of it. And, it is giving, right? Like to bring other people into your dream. And it is giving to like want to rally towards something and pay people and like want to win together, right? So I always think we should all be appreciative of having that opportunity and to join someone on their mission and in the dream. So, but I think right now it's hard because the market's not there, right? Like no one's in this appreciation zone. Like we're in the lowest like engagement zone since I think people started tracking. It's something like, 7 out of 10 people are actively disengaged. So I think that this is terrifying, right? Because turnover is low, right? And then engagement's low. So then that means productivity sucks, right? And it's like
all-time low. If you look at the like global stats.
Yeah, it is like low. Like, yeah, you follow anything, like all of the stats from any organization, there's not one going in the other direction. And, right now, I think they're saying like at the point, like of people just resting, like at any tenure in an organization, 4 out of 10 are thinking of quitting right now. Right. And that's like a McKinsey study. But I've seen other ones that 1 out of 4 are thinking of quitting right when they join, which I'm just like, man, like this is a whole different market, right? Like you should be excited to join somewhere. But the thing is, I think that there's like the layer on top of it is the whole affordability crisis, right? So it's expensive to live. So people get a job somewhere and then this kind of are just like, well, what else is out there? Like, how could I make more money or whatnot, right? So like, it's kind of complex, but I think there's things you can do, like, like in an organization like your own. I was thinking about like, what is the one thing that probably people don't focus enough on as leaders or as HR leaders in organizations? And I think it's connection. Like we measure engagement all day long and it's such a, looking back metric. But I think we should talk about connection. Like how connected do you feel to the organization?
I completely agree. I've never talked about connection to the organization, but I completely agree. I mean, that's got to be something that people, I mean, talent leaders, HR leaders should definitely be rethinking about that, like especially that part of engagement, especially in remote companies. I mean, there was always that question. I don't know if you've had it on your surveys, but I think it's on like every engagement survey I've ever been on is like, do you have a best friend at work? And I used to always be able to say yes. When you're in office, like the people you go for lunch with every day, I'm fortunate I started a company with my 2 best friends, or you end up hiring a bunch of your friends, especially early days. So I have lots of best friends at work. But I imagine how hard it would be, coming out of school, joining a remote company, and it's like, do you have a best friend at work? Well, one of our marketing leaders the other day was like, I've never met anyone from the company in real life. Like, I've been here a year, and like, I've never met anyone.
Yeah, and like as a fun fact, I don't know if you know what organizational network mapping is. Sounds so weird, but
I would love to know more.
it's like like imagine you're drawing the Big Dipper and you're connecting all the dots, right? So it's that type of thing, but like connections within organizations. So there's organizations that actually do like organizational network mapping, being like, okay, Susy knows Andy, and then she also talks to Holly and she talks to all these other people, right? So like, how many people am I actually connected to the organization to kind of figure out how connected organizations are? And I know someone who specializes in this. And right now, with the hybrid way that we work, on average, people are connected to only 3 people. Whoops, that was 4. 3 people at work. And it's crazy, right? Like that's like your manager, probably the people who hired you, like maybe your recruiter, and then one other person. So for me, this is no question. Like, of course you don't feel connected, right? Like unless your manager is doing a really great job of like remote leadership, you know what I mean? Like, and just really, otherwise you're just floating out there into the abyss. And then that connection piece is gone, right? And we know that connecting creates better collaboration, more innovation, right? Like greater ideas by all of these, people call it collisions, but it's really about us all connecting with one another. So, yeah, I think that there's an opportunity here that's huge to kind of think about it more as like how connected are you to other people, like who do you know, and to develop those opportunities to like do what we used to do, right? Like have the coffee, meet your friends, go to go out for lunch and like, I don't know, go and drop by someone's desk. Like we're so lucky to grow up during that era where that was normal and people could see you were struggling. They'd be like, what is Susie doing? I'm like, I don't know. I'm like freaking out trying to figure out stuff. Like they could see you, where you bombed out in a meeting or you saw someone else do awesome in a meeting, you know what I mean? And, you were there for those lived experiences together and kind of learned so much really through osmosis, right? So you need to curate a lot of that now with distributed teams. Like you need to put a lot more time in the planning, the thinking through of what to talk about, how to keep people aligned, how to keep them engaged. So there is a lot of time that's needed, I think, like especially in this era of powering up our leaders for sure. Because they're your stewards. Like you can't do it, Andy. Like you have so much energy. You could do it, but like you're gonna die. Like you can't just go everybody. Like you need to pump up yourself, and like your leaders need to help you, right? You need to have that whole nucleus in your organization of leaders that can really do this and make it happen.
So, question for you. I mean, you talk about spending this time with startups, remote or in person. How are you guiding those teams?
Yeah, I think that in general, I think both can work, right? Like I work, for example, with a company named Kits. Do you know Kits? Because you're out west, like Kits.ca. So they're online online eyewear, like kind of like affordable luxury. They're super cool glasses. They're 100% in person. So this is like,
yeah,
counter like what most people are doing. And they have an awesome culture, right? Like they get stuff done. They're very collaborative. Like people are wonderful, right? And they've created that and they've made that expectation. And then they run with that, right? So people know on day one when they're joining, like this isn't an in-office team. So I think it's something to be celebrated if you're doing it. And like, you can get everybody in person, right? Because they're manufacturing in Canada. They're, doing all that work in Canada, right? Like the corporate side as well as like the warehousing side, et cetera, right? So I think that works. The norm is really distributed teams. And I think in terms of distributed teams, there needs to be a lot more work, like a kind of a reset. Because what I think happened is like, if you go back in history and I think about myself, I worked in a lot of global roles, right? Like, and I worked a lot out of my laptop bag and we'd set up in different places in different countries and whatever over the years as like an auditor or like just different leadership roles I had. But I was more senior in the organization, right? So there was already a lot of norms. I was already trained. Like I shouldn't be in a cafe opening up all the company's insider information, you know what I mean? And taking calls there, I would have like training on like how to, store my laptop, right? Like nobody talks about this stuff anymore, right? And locking it down and everybody would get a key and like, there was just so much stuff when we were getting trained. Right. And I think when COVID hit, everybody's like, this is amazing. We can all work from anywhere. Right. Which is amazing. But we went like full throttle that way with no training. So I think that for hybrid teams, there's still a bit of stepping back. Right. And really training people about the intentionality of managing distributed teams. Like I was trained by so many smart people and like very experienced people in doing this, right? Like I had that advantage. I'd been in like many global organizations where I was working in distributed teams a lot before COVID. And so we had a lot of norms and you could see what went well, what didn't go well, what people wanted, engagement surveys globally, like a lot of practice in that. So I think that, one of the other things that we were talking about before this call was like, if you only had 30 minutes, to spend with your team every week, like what would you focus on? Like, I would say this is like some pro tips, I think, for like the distributed managers or any manager would be number one, like tell them what's going on. Give them like a state of the union, being like, hey guys, like, I don't think people do this anymore. And it's like the most basic thing. It's like, hey, last week, this is what's going on in the org. Like we're doing this, this, and this. These are the top 3 things going on. There's also these fun events going on. And these few people are out of the office or something, like just a basic, like what's up in the organization, right? So everybody knows and everybody feels part of it just by sharing that. Everybody be like, oh, cool. I'm in the know. I know these things are going on and these people are here. Those people are there. And then it'd be like, okay, so like, let's check in on our goals. And then I would just, that's the second part, check in on your goals. And then like, and think about, how are you tracking against those, and just do a quick run through, maybe around the horn with your team. And then the third thing needs to be recognition, because people, that whole idea of connectedness and like being burnt out and all of that type of sentiment, I don't think we spend enough time in recognition. Like people have been like yourself, probably like sprinting for years in your organization, right? And sprinting. Like I saw companies last year sprint right to the like end of the year, and they had knockout years. Like they doubled everything, like really awesome years. And you're like, man, this is amazing. And it's just like everybody felt burnt out, not happy about it. You're like, man, that sucks. It's like
Yeah.
anticlimactic thing that sucks ever. And it's because people don't celebrate it enough. You know what I mean? Or take a moment, because they're always looking for the next thing. Everything's moving so fast everywhere. I see it like across North America, like all of my customers, like it's, it is, recognition is a thing that people believe in, but to put it in practice, it has to be very, very intentional. And I think it could start in that 30 minutes a week.
I love it. I mean, we created a news show. We created a news show 2 years ago, and we did it 30 minutes every week. And it brought up engagement massively. We stopped doing it, made some changes, stopped doing it, and you could see the decline. We've brought it back now, and it's a noticeable difference just by telling people what's going on and doing that recognition. Also, those years that you kill it and then you get the burnout. I know for me personally, I suffered huge burnout at the end of 2023. We had a really good year, came into 2024, and like I was like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. Like I was exhausted. I ended up bringing in someone to take my role just because I was like, I'm just so exhausted. And it's because you're always thinking about like, okay, what can I do next? What can I do next? What can I improve on? What's the thing? And I imagine if I was feeling that way, like, how's my team feeling? Like I'm, this is my baby, like I'm carrying this thing. Like I started it and I'm feeling burnt out. And then how's the team feeling? And then honestly, in 2024, a bit of market headwinds, but also like just kind of, I think, general burnout. Like, we didn't decrease, but if you look at the velocity definitely came down. So in 2025, I'm like, okay, how do we develop sustainably with urgency and deliver that recognition? And also, I think another piece is like compensating the best people. And compensation's has always been a tricky thing. And I found that compensation doesn't necessarily have to be cash. I did a funny experiment with that a few weeks ago that I'd love to share. But what do you find on the compensation front when it comes to that recognition?
Yeah. Well, first, I'd just like to say that, like, yeah, I'm sorry that you got to the burnout level. And like, I feel like it's nice to hear you share your story, because I think a lot of people got there because we went from this growth at all cost market to like really being focused on the bottom line, and that hustle for like 2 years. It's long, right? Like since that happened. So I'm glad you're back and you're on top of it again. And I think from a compensation perspective, like there's a few thoughts I have on this. I think when you're kind of scaling, I call it compensation soup. Okay. Like when you start, it's like, you have the dream. People are signing up for the dream. They sign up for the equity and they get paid like nothing. Right.
Yeah.
So like you're below the poverty line on pay, but you have the dream of the equity. Right. And then as you keep on getting a bit bigger, then you have more money. So then people get paid a little bit better, and maybe a little bit less equity. And then eventually you get to a point where you've benchmarked all your roles, you're paying people to market, and then kind of the standardized equity. Right. You need to fix that as soon as possible, like build that infrastructure from a compensation perspective early, because it's so expensive to correct. And, just because someone started, with a lot of equity and a dream doesn't mean you could keep them at their salary at like such a low level too. So I think that's something that's hard for founders and maybe yourself. People are like, no, as like that person has like, I don't know, $50 million in equity. And you're like, well, that was the risk they took. That's awesome. They should win.
Yeah.
Right. And they should also get a normal salary. So like, I think that's something I talk a lot about. I think in terms of like recognizing your highest performers, I think for sure there needs to be a plan there, and that it all comes down to your goals, right? Like for me, you need to know, what are you compensating for, right? Like what behaviors are you actually trying to drive? that's the first thing. Because people usually do it in the opposite way. Someone's freaking out. Someone wants to quit. You know what I mean? Oh my God, they're the best. Throw them like whatever, get them to stay. You know what I mean? They kind of do all this like patchwork, you know what I mean? And create this weird expectation, from both leadership and that person, right? So I think the key is like just to be a bit more organized about it in general. Like, things are always going to happen, but like, I think you really, really need to lock down on your goals. And then if they exceed their goals, then yeah, that's awesome. Then make it so that they really, really win. That's going to make you go all the miles. And yeah, you're right. Like not everybody cares as much about money. I think money, you have to be, looking at that affordability crisis, make sure you're paying living wages and above if you can afford it. And then otherwise, there's things like a trip to Hawaii. To just like, you know what? I'm going to feel like $1 million. And if you want to send me to Hawaii for a week, I'll be like, Andy's the best, man. I just went to Hawaii, like with my partner, my loved one, whatever. And that goes a long way, like kind of coming up with these creative ways. Or another one I really like is MedCan. I don't know if you know them, or like Cleveland Clinic. Are you familiar?
Yeah.
So every time that I've introduced people, I've implemented that basically these are like medical checks that, they're probably like a couple $1,000s that it's really expensive for someone to pay on their own and maybe to take the time to do this from themselves, but they check everything like head to toe to make sure you're healthy. Right. So it's kind of like an I love you in like a medical care, right? Perspective. And you go, it's like almost like a spa. You start at 8 a.m. and then, they do your blood work. They scan everything you can imagine. And like you come back with reports and like, you work with dietitians, mental health, like everything is usually incorporated into these tests. So I kind of like that one too. Like as a benefit or a reward. Like you could.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
I would hate to see my scorecard on that though.
Obviously, it's death by statistics. I'm sure for me, like, I remember going into these and the doctor, and there's like, yeah, no woman's ever escaped this room without crying. So you're like, too fat. I'm like, my iron's too low. Like, it's like all of these things. And you're like, oh God. Right. And, but it's good, right? Like, it is like a little bit death by statistics, but we need to do that, right? You need to, and just do it. And younger founders are like, I'm in amazing shape and like, this is awesome. Let's compete. I've seen that version 2 of this where they're like, which is awesome, right? Like you want people to be healthy, and the younger you do this type of stuff, the better, right? Because you can really keep some checks and balances for your life. So
I gotta figure out the founders who have figured out how to maintain a work-life balance, stay fit, have a family and run their business and also, be healthy. I feel like I have like this much artery left, and, I'm always walking that fine line of like, my wife should probably leave me because, I've got all the priorities. I mean, thankfully she's a saint and she's the reason that I'm here and I'm able to do all of this stuff because she just enables me to do everything and also is like the counterbalance to me, which is awesome. But definitely like if I didn't have her in my life, that would be more challenging. But I can't figure out the like, exercising thing. I mean, I get up at 5 every morning. I try and exercise, but the travel, like last year I was on the road pretty much 6 to 12 months, like in terms of number of days.
Yeah. This year I tried, well, I don't know. I'm also failing on that front. The things that I've tried, Orange Theory. I don't know if you've tried that.
Yeah. There's one down the street.
See, this is perfect. I used to have one down the street and I went religiously. It's 1 hour, like big workout. Like I would really, really suck when I started. And then I started to see progress and then they closed it. I was like, so it was so close to home, right? So then I kind of like did other things. And now most recently, I've actually invested in a Peloton, like the bicycle. And that thing is awesome. It depends what you like, but I really like it because it's in my house, right? Like I usually don't like to work out at home, but I like it because it has classes and, and it has like, you can compete against the other people who are biking. So, and you get to, and it has so many trends. Like if you like tracking yourself, you can see like how you're doing, how many rides you've done, all that stuff. And if you're, getting your best scores. So I've liked that. And it has to be easy access or you're never going to do it.
I've got my home gym. My problem is I need the pocket Peloton because I'm just on the road so much. I mean, I'm in 5 cities in the next 5 weeks. Like London now, I'm in South Africa next week. Then I'm in Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, home. So I'm basically guaranteed to put on 20 pounds in the next 5 weeks. So we're doing this podcast now because I'd be a little heavier in the face in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I think in this case, all you can do is try to sleep and walk.
Yeah.
That's it. And like try to be somewhat reasonable about what you eat. But like but you should also enjoy. I don't know. It's all ups and downs. It's not easy, right? Like I think when you're going full throttle, like sometimes you're just going full throttle. Like that's it. And then, you need to do your best to recuperate. I think sleep's so important. Like eventually, like you have to catch up on your sleep. And then go again. And like it takes a village. It takes figuring out how to parse out what you're doing. And I think somebody who's like I'm like a big executor. Like I love to get things done, do lots of different things. So I'm like total burnout profile, like come up with ideas and execute. And like, I'm sure this sounds like you too. And it's just like at a certain point, you're just like, okay, I need to sleep. I need to eat and I need to reset. And then you start again. Right. So I think it's just a lifelong challenge for this type of personality type.
So MedCan, Cleveland Clinic, and sleep rewards for your top performers.
Yeah.
And Hawaiian vacations.
Yep. I like that. Yep, for sure. That's like cool. I think the goal is when you recognize someone, they should feel like they have a gold card. Like,
yeah.
Like I have made it. This is amazing. They get to stay in the lounge or something that, when they're flying, they're like, yes, I am the best. Right. Like, it's worth it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because we did something recently where we had some top performers deliver a product, very cool AI verification. So verifying employment, education instantly. In a whole bunch of cases, there's obviously some edge cases. And from concept to completion, it was 3 weeks. So I said to that team, you've got a choice. I'll give you a cash bonus or I'll fly you to an AI conference. And one of our investors is the chief product officer at OpenAI. So you're going to have this VIP experience. Now it's going to cost the same either way. It's like, what do you choose? And like unanimously, they were all like, I want to go do the event. And it's a win-win-win because it's like a cool experience for them, great learning. And, for the company, it's like, they're going to bring back all this cool stuff that they heard and did. So I love those types of rewards. And I'm thankful that, there are people on the team that are like, that's what gets them excited.
It's another good one that kind of, I don't know. I think it's dead, but it's different now because of like, after COVID, people kind of work from anywhere. But the whole idea of international assignments for someone who likes that, like just to have the ability to go work wherever, like I think because I've done it, it's just so awesome. It's a different experience. Like we're talking about the cultural nuances. Like you can only really get a taste of that being immersed in it, right? And like being stretched. I think that's such a great recognition to be like doing 6 months secondments or 3 months or a year, depending on who it is and like what levels, or even 2 years, you know what I mean? Depending on what it is, or someone could rotate. Like I did a lot of like 6-month rotations where I worked in like, I think 14 to 20 countries, like in my 20s, where I basically was with GE and audit, and we got sent like all over Europe to all the different countries in Latin America, and then into the US to different places, different businesses. And you're learning just as like, and your life experiences. And I just feel like it would be good to give that to, if I was you, Andy, like, you know what I mean? Like if you can do that, like that's awesome to do for someone, you know what I mean? And so motivating and so great for the company, and it forms all those connections. There's so much winning, right? Like GE have the best programs. I still stand by that till today. Like they had, when we were there, invested $1 billion a year in learning and development. And, they really had a global workforce where people were cross-pollinating, going pole to pole, like, and would know so many people in all the different functional areas, business areas. And they had people that had such long tenures with them when they're all like together as a company.
Yeah, GE has huge tenure. We have to do more secondments. Funny enough, we tried to do a couple last year, and there was a bunch, and we tried to focus on that kind of 20 to 30-year-old category before they were kind of locked down. The number of people are like, no, I don't want to. I'm like, you don't want to move to Australia during Canadian winter. Like, what is wrong with you? Like, 6 months in Australia during Canadian winter. I would have expected people to like be, and it's like, I thought the knives were going to come out, but people are just, there's definitely a generation or like a group of people that are like, I don't want to go. But this year we've done one so far. I mean, it's only February, so like we've done one so far, and we plan to do a couple more, and people are more keen. Maybe it's like, maybe the ticket is to do it in like February and not October, because in February people in especially in Canada and the UK where we have a concentration of people are like, I need to get out of here. And speaking of getting out of here, Susy, this has been awesome. What an incredible conversation. You've given us a lot to think about, from from focusing on connections to some practical insights that I know I'm going to start applying in my 30 minutes of engagement every week. So thank you so much for joining us. And to our listeners, I know you got value out of today's episode, so hit the subscribe button, leave us a review, and share it with your team. We'll be back soon with more straight talk on the future of work. See you next time.